Hey, welcome back to the channel. It's a bit of a mess today. I'm working on a new track, Midnight Drive Part 5, Giallo, and this will be my tribute, homage to my favorite two composers of one of my favorite genres, the Giallo thriller slash slasher genre of the 70s and 80s, championed by directors like Dario Argento. So I wanted this installment of my Midnight Drive series to reflect my admiration for the two composers, Fabio Frizzi, which did a lot of work for Lucio Fulci, and Claudio Simonetti, which did a lot of work for Dario Argento and other directors as well. And this track is taking inspiration from Tenebre of Argento, with its more synthy soundtrack than Simonetti did previously with Goblin, which was more prog rock. And Fabio Frizzi also did the glorious soundtrack for Zombie Flesh Eaters, or Zombie 2, which is not giallo by genre. It's a horror movie, but nevertheless, he has some elements in his music that I also like to incorporate into this track. This is the Prophet VS you're hearing. I've MIDI'd it up to the Prophet X here. And what I'm going to do is use a preset from the Prophet X, not the sound, but every preset, every factory preset on the Prophet X has a inbuilt sequence to it. I'm going to use that sequence and drive that out through the MIDI ports and into the Prophet VS. And as such, playing that sequence on the Prophet VS in sync with the tempo of the song, 110 BPMs. And I can transpose live on the fly if I want to. Trying out some chords first. And I want this track to be a sort of two-chord track. And I'm going to use these bass-driven sequences to propel the song along. This is the patch on the Prophet VS. So these are the two chords I'm going to use: C minor and G minor with a B flat bass. So I might throw in the odd chord to get some momentum. So in reality, it won't strictly be a two-chord track as I initially wanted, but almost. I think that will do nicely. So let's record it. This is all played by hand, straight into the DAW as audio from the Juno 106. When you watch this video and hopefully listen to the finalized track later on, know that this is done live. What you're seeing and hearing here is the actual recording of the Juno 106 as you hear it in the finalized track. All played by hand. No sequencers, no MIDI. All pads and strings on my tracks. are played by hand, recorded live. I like to humanize my tracks as much as possible by playing things by hand. As I'm recording this, I'm not sure about these drums. I might have to change some of them to sound a bit more 80s. Working on this, I had to find an intro part. And let's turn off the reverb here. Synthbrass. That sounds pretty 80s. Can't use that one, of course, but the sound is good. So let's add some reverb here. I want the sound to start almost as in mono, no reverb, and just fade up that stereo reverb as the chord is held. So let's do that. Turn the wet balance all the way down so there's no reverb, and let's record it. So the synth itself is quite mono, but by fading up that stereo chorus reverb in real time as we record this, we add a sort of space, we wrap the sound in stereo space. So I think this is a nice way of doing it quite 80s, and I like it. And I just hold this until the drum starts. I stop the synth, and the reverb tails are the only thing going over into the tracks with the drums and everything. But I need one more thing, a sort of synth theme signature. And again, I have to use some sort of Synthbrass. I want to record as much as possible with the reverbs on it or reverbs off, so I don't have to make decisions in the mixing stage later, or as few decisions as possible. So now I'm just noodling with this sound and the Lexicon PCM70, trying to find the sweet spot for the sound and its reverb. Ultimately, I might end up with no reverb at all for this sound. It depends on how the arrangement goes. And to offset this synth theme signature, I want something else, another part that I can take over and add some counterpoint to this. So I found a sound here, and let's record it. So it's playing one octave below. I have to do another take here. And this will be my homage to Fabio Frizzi. While the rest of the track is a homage to Claudio Simonetti. So these are my two heroes from the giallo genre. And another thing is that I want to have a arpeggiated part underneath that mono synth from the intro. And I have to do a Jupiter 8 sample here on my Prophet X to get that attack of those two oscillators, typical for the Jupiter 8 and two oscillator Roland synths of the time. And especially for Dario Argento movies, when you hear this type of pattern and sound, something bad is about to happen. The violence is going to burst onto the scene, and right quick. Now let's head over into the DAW and see how I've used all these parts and more to create the final, mix. Here we are inside the DAW, and I'm gonna play the track from start to finish, and I'll break it down afterwards, and we'll compare different types of takes to what you heard in the first part of the video. So let's go. The most obvious part was, of course, the new ambient intro, which I didn't talk about earlier in the video. And I wanted something ambient to sort of set the mood for this giallo thriller suspense track. And why not just go full on board with crickets playing in the evening, some footsteps, some breathing, heavy breathing, and the draw of the knife and the woman screaming, of course, all the ingredients of a good slasher in Argento Fulci style. So let's break down that intro first. The breathing part, that was yours truly, breathing down the microphone here. And I had some ambience from crickets, I had some footsteps, and I had a knife draw, and I had a scream, and everything except for my own breathing here is pulled out of Pixabay, which is a place I often go to find sound effects or images, videos to put in my music and YouTube content. And the best part about Pixabay is that it's totally free, royalty free. You don't have to pay anything. You don't have to credit authors or anything like that. You can if you want to, but it's just grab and use as you see fit. I'm not sponsored in any way by Pixabay. I just use those as use them as a source of free clips for use in my music or videos. I mostly use it for sound effects like this or clip art, etc. My own breathing. And the draw of the knife and the woman screaming. And while this is happening, you hear that arpeggiated part going pan between left and right and coming and going with the reverb and delay. Some of the Lexicon PCM70 and some delays put on afterwards. And this is, of course, a homage to the Argento movies. Claudio Simonetti often used this kind of arpeggiated part in the background just prior to the actual killing taking place on screen as a warning to us watching. It's about to happen. So I just wanted to tribute those kinds of arpeggiated parts in this song as well. This whole song track is a tribute to all my heroes in terms of movies, composers that did all those slasher suspense movies, giallo, in the 70s and 80s. I love those movies. I still do. I watch as many as I can, but time is limited, of course. Yes, let's get going. But I've added a little part underneath here as well. Also from the Prophet VS, a little thing going between left and right to add a little bit of movement. And remember, I did that first synth here through the Lexicon PCM70 with the wet balance all towards dry in the beginning, so there's no reverb when the synth starts playing to get that sort of 70s, 80s lo-fi vibe. But I slowly increase the wetness of the reverb so it pans out in stereo, sort of the reverb itself pans out in stereo as the synth progresses. But this is also highly enjoyable in mono. And I've also included a mono mix in my Bandcamp release because listening to this in mono really gives the vibe of listening or watching this on a VHS in the late 70s, early 80s, or in a movie at the time, where you often always had or nearly almost always had the mono soundtrack playing. So let's check out this intro in mono from start to finish here, the intro only. So this is mono. I think this is great, listening to this in mono. Instant 70s, 80s nostalgia, watching late night movies in glorious mono. Stereo. Mono. Stereo. Okay, so the drums are coming in here, and of course more different than the ones I used when I laid down some of the tracks. You can hear it instantly. So let's check out the drums in isolation here. So I've pretty much taken out everything except for those claps, snare claps coming here left and right. But I've added or taken out everything else and replaced it with a Lindrum kick, a Lindrum snare, some shakers, some hats, those claps that I had in the original drums, and another crash. So everything is sort of switched out. And I did that because the drums coming from the JD800, Roland JD800, that I had as a temp drum track, sounded too 90s. It was too 90s in sound. I liked the drum programming. I used that pattern in my JD800 demo song, which you can check back on my channel if you want to. But the drums were a little bit too 90s, so I ultimately decided to go back to a mix of Lindrums and some fillers. So that's why I've done that. I think it sounds much more authentic now with these drums. So the drums are now a little bit different. The bass part, as you saw in the beginning of the video, is the same as before. Just the Prophet X pumping out its MIDI sequence data over to the Prophet VS, which is actually the bass sound here. The Juno part is the same as you saw earlier, played by hand from start to finish. I just had to do a little bit of retake at the end here, but again, all played by hand, no MIDI involved as such. And no delays, reverbs, or anything on this Juno 106 pad sound, string sound with chorus 2. I think it's absolutely the best way to go if you want to create ambience and space in a mix, to have some parts totally reverb and delay free, while other parts are heavily drenched in reverb or delay. That way you can really add texture and space, dimension, 3D space between each instrument's the layers. If you sort of look down into a tunnel where the instruments, the sounds are placed after each other in 3D space, if that makes sense. So no delays or reverbs on this Juno 106. And here we have another track, this track here, which I didn't go through at all in the beginning of the video when I showed some of the parts. And this is also a sound from the Prophet X. And I like this sound because it alternated between the left and the right with a choir sound, and some of the chords doesn't really match up with the chords in this particular 2-chord track. But that added to the sort of slightly dementia of the whole thing and worked perfectly as a backdrop to the rest of this arrangement. So let's check that out in isolation. So I think that works very well. That part here you've heard already, sort of the signature theme. Every sound is, of course, a little bit detuned here and there, and with the chorusing of the Lexicon PCM70, a lot of chorusing on the reverb tails add to that sort of authentic feel of the overall sound. It sounds kind of like it could have come out of the 70s or 80s. Recorded in the DAW digitally, of course, makes it a bit too clean. Everything is a bit too clean. You can hear it's not coming from tape, but you get the picture, and I'm pretty happy with how this panned out regardless. Another sound creates ambience below everything else. And now we're coming up where I add those, let's call it Fabio Frizzi, almost Baroque style of playing. And when those kick in, I also add a little bit of a glitch sound, again from the Prophet X. And this is all done to add texture, to add ambience, and to add some craziness to everything, to mix in and blend in all the dementia of the narrative in the song. This is supposed to be a giallo tribute song, so I have to mix in some things that break the tonality and add some confusion to everything. Those parts are, of course, a tribute to Frizzi, as I told you, and especially the Zombie Flesh Eaters theme, Zombie 2, which has a sort of similar style of playing with the Synthbrass. And with this, you've actually heard the whole thing. Now I just repeat the different parts and bits and pieces and just drive the track throughout. The only thing is, towards the end, I take off more and more. And at the very end, I also bring in some of those crickets playing at the end there, a little bit of footsteps, and I'm adding a little bit of that first arpeggiated part and close it off almost as we started. Mono. Well, I just thought it was appropriate to end the whole thing with that draw of the blade again. After all, you know what this song or track is supposed to be. Well, I hope you liked this. I had a lot of fun making this track, taking elements of all my favorite soundtracks and bits and pieces from various giallo movies. I've used a lot of different tech here, both old and new, and this is how it is in 2024. You use whatever is necessary to make the track the way you want it to sound. Old or new, doesn't matter as long as you have fun doing it and the result. Like I said, the track is out now on Bandcamp. I'll leave a link for you in the video description, and I'll put the track up on my playlist here on YouTube as well. As always, I'm Espen Kraft. Thank you so much for watching. Arrivederci.